Before China was China, it was really just an idea. And man, what an idea! One that would have to be forged in centuries of absolute chaos, fire, and blood. This is the story of its violent, spectacular birth.
All right, so let's just jump right into this, because it's one of history's great big paradoxes. I mean, how does this happen? We're talking about a story of unbelievable ambition, ruthless efficiency, and a fatal flaw. A flaw so simple, it's almost hard to believe. So how did it all go down? Let's find out.
Okay, so to really get how China was born, you first have to understand the world it came from. And trust me, that world was pure, unfiltered chaos.
So you can just forget about a single unified country. That number you're looking at right there, 140. That's how many different states were packed into this land, and every single one of them was locked in a desperate, never-ending war for survival against everybody else.
Yeah, this was the infamous Warring States period, and it was the ultimate high-stakes game. The rule was brutally simple. Get stronger, get smarter, get more ruthless than your neighbors, or you, your people, your entire culture would be wiped from existence. It was basically natural selection, but for entire nations.
And out of all this chaos, this royal rumble of states, rises a total underdog, the state of Qin. They were way out on the rugged western frontier, and the other, more civilized states, they just looked down on them, even calling them semi-barbarians. Oh boy, were they about to regret that. See, the Qin had a secret weapon. They adopted this radical, brand new philosophy called legalism. And let me tell you, this was cold, calculating, and unbelievably effective. This wasn't about what's right or what's wrong or tradition. No, it was about one thing: power and control. It basically turned the entire state into a hyper-efficient machine built for a single purpose: making war.
And this system, wow, it was the blueprint for total, absolute control. I want you to just imagine this for a second. A society where your neighbors were legally required to spy on you. A world where the only way to get ahead was by your results on the battlefield, not who your dad was. And all those old, powerful, noble families, stripped of all their influence, gone. It was a system designed to literally terrify its own people into obedience and squeeze every last drop of power out for the war effort.
So with this terrifyingly powerful system locked in place and led by their incredibly ambitious king, Yin Zheng, the Qin were finally ready. It was time to end centuries of war by starting the biggest war of them all, the conquest of everyone.
First up, they went for the low-hanging fruit, the state of Han. They were right next door, and they were the weakest of the major powers left. The Qin army just rolled in, and within a year, boom, the first domino fell.
Next on the list was Zhao. But here's the thing. The Qin won this war before the first sword was even drawn. Their spies were just that good. They played on the Zhao king's paranoia, and they convinced him that his best general was a traitor. And what does the king do? He executes his own commander, leaving his entire army leaderless and just ripe for the picking.
Okay, for their third target, Wei, the Qin ran into a problem: a really well-defended capital city. A long, bloody siege? No, that's not their style. They chose brutal, horrifying efficiency instead. They actually engineered a massive canal, diverted the mighty Yellow River, and just drowned the entire city into submission. We're talking over 100,000 people dead, just like that.
Now, the state of Chu, this was the real heavyweight. A massive army, maybe 1 million soldiers strong. The Qin actually attacked and lost at first. But did they give up? Nope. They retreated, spent an entire year secretly training a new army, an army specifically designed to fight in Chu's swampy southern terrain. And then they came back and completely overwhelmed them. Just incredible patience and strategy.
At this point, the war had become personal. The Crown Prince of Yan, totally terrified of the Qin war machine, did something desperate. He sent an assassin to kill King Yin Zheng. Well, the attempt failed, and the king's response was swift and total. He sent his armies north, not just for land this time, but for pure, cold-blooded revenge.
And they just left one. The final state, Qi. They saw the writing on the wall. I mean, who wouldn't? The Qin didn't even need their army for this one. They just used their massive treasury to bribe key officials in the Qi court, who then went and convinced their king that resistance was totally pointless. So the king surrendered, without a single battle being fought. And just like that, after centuries of bloodshed, the wars were over. So King Yin Zheng had done the impossible.
He now ruled all of the Chinese states, what we now call China. He even gave himself a new title, Qin Shi Huang, the first sovereign emperor. But, conquering the land, turns out that was the easy part. Now he had to conquer the culture.
And with a single stroke of a pen, he just abolished the entire old system of feudalism. That number, 120,000, that's how many noble families across the empire were stripped of their land, their private armies, their power, overnight. It was a political revolution on a scale that's just hard to even imagine.
Then, to build a single, unified identity, he forced everyone, and I mean everyone, to use the same writing system, the same money, the same weights and measures. He even standardized the width of cart axles. Now that sounds kind of boring, right? But think about it. It meant that every single cart in the empire could travel in the same ruts on the new imperial highways he was building. He was literally and figuratively paving the way for a single China.
But he was just as ruthless in peace as he was in war. To get rid of any dissenting ideas, any competing thoughts, he ordered the burning of any book that didn't fit with his version of history. And to protect his new empire from northern invaders, he conscripted hundreds of thousands of people to connect all the existing border walls into one single, massive fortification, the Great Wall.
So, the first emperor builds this empire that he designed to last for 10,000 years. It didn't even make it to 15. After all that bloodshed, all that conquest, all that brilliant consolidation, the collapse was shockingly, unbelievably swift.
Just look at this timeline. It says it all. The emperor dies in 210 BCE. Just 3 years later, his entire dynasty is gone. Poof. All that power, all that control, it just vanished in the blink of an eye. So what on earth happened? Well, the answer, bizarrely enough, lies in a simple story about a rainstorm.
The story goes like this. 2 army generals were ordered to move their troops to a new position. They had a very specific deadline, and these were loyal, competent officers of the state, good soldiers. But on their march, they ran into a problem they just couldn't control. Heavy rains caused massive flooding, which made the roads totally impassable. They were going to be late. Now, this wasn't their fault, right? It was an act of God. But in the Qin system, that didn't matter, not one bit. You see, the law was absolute. The penalty for being late, for any reason whatsoever, was death, execution. So the 2 generals, they looked at their options, certain death for being late, or, possible death for starting a rebellion. They chose to fight for their lives. And that one single decision sparked other rebellions, and then others, and pretty soon the entire empire was in flames. The Qin's greatest strength, its rigid, uncompromising, brutal system, had become its own fatal flaw.
And that leaves us with this huge question, right? Did the Qin dynasty actually fail? I mean, it was a spectacular failure in one sense, a brief, brutal flash in the pan. But the idea of a unified China, of a centralized government, a common script, a shared culture, that idea survived. The Qin may have collapsed into dust, but they created the blueprint, the mold, that pretty much every Chinese dynasty for the next 2,000 years would try to fill. So, was it a failure? Or was it maybe the most important failure in all of history?